Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, alcoholics and addicts of all ages, welcome to Canadian Sober, eh? I'm your host, Dougie Fresh. We're going to get started right now. I heard a quote the other day by the guest that we're having on the show today, and it says, "Say what you mean, but say it nicely." And I started thinking about that the other day, and I was thinking to myself, when I first came in recovery, I heard a phrase of "tell me what I need to hear, not tell me what I want to hear." And when I spoke to my sponsor about that, my sponsor says, "Well, Doug, a lot of people come into the program of recovery, and some people will tell them what they like to hear, so they keep that friendship." He goes, "I'm not one of those people. I'm going to tell you what you need to hear." And sometimes for people in recovery, that can be a little harsh, especially if it's something directed towards you changing your lifestyle or changing the way you live your program. So I get what our guest is saying. You don't want to scare off the individual, but you want to tell them in a way that that is kind and not meant to be hurtful. Is that what I'm kind of like guessing, Tammie, from your quote? Ladies and gentlemen, world meet Tammie. Tammie meet world. How's it going, Tammie?
Hello, world. Hello, Doug. I'm doing great tonight. Thank you so much for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. Is that what you meant by the quote in somewhat?
Yeah, so there's actually a couple of ways to look at the quote that I shared with you. So definitely, I believe that you're on the right tangent for one of the ways to look at it, because I think you're right. Like, some people really need to hear, in a sort of very direct way, what needs to change in our lives when we come into recovery, because our old ways weren't working for us. And, we really do need to change things. And sometimes the best approach for certain people, for some people, is to, have a sponsor that can say that really directly. That wasn't the case for me. I think I would have run 10 miles in the other direction if I had a sponsor that was being really direct and really harsh with me, because I think that's part of my story. I just, I was never good with conflict, never good with confrontation. So I really do wonder if that would have been something that would have turned me off of, this program of recovery. So fortunately for me, when I was introduced to my sponsor, she is just like the sweetest human being, and she handles me with a lot of care. And she was just somebody who had what I wanted, so I look to her all the time, as somebody who has what I want. And, yeah, when she has something to tell me, she handles that with care. And I just love that about her.
So tell the world a little bit about yourself, your experience, strength, and hope.
I guess one of the most important things that I'd like to share about my story is that I grew up on the East Coast of Canada in a very regular Canadian household. I had two brothers, parents, loving family, so many opportunities with regards to activities and academics. There was nothing really special about the way that I grew up. And when I say special, it was very special. Don't get me wrong. It was a really great childhood. What I mean by it wasn't very special is that there wasn't really any particular thing that stands out that I can pinpoint that leads me to becoming an alcoholic. I did have alcoholism on both sides of my family. So, the genetics are there. But, really, I think now that I'm in recovery, I can sort of see lots of hints along the way that are commonalities, amongst people in recovery. And, one of the things for me that really stands out is that growing up, I really always was looking at other people, trying to figure out like who I wanted to be. And I was never really confident about like who I was. And so I was always looking to other people, and measuring myself against them. So, especially, all the girls, I always measured myself against all the other girls, and wanted to be like one of the popular kids. And I had so many great friends. And one of the themes too is that, like, I always prided myself, at the time anyway, like that I used to get along with so many different groups of people. And I used to think that was like pretty cool that I could like get along with all these different groups of people. I was into sports. So, I would hang with the athletes. I was into like some musical theater. I would hang with them. I was into my church community. So I would hang out with those people. And like, I always just felt like I was always trying to be what everyone else expected me to be. And I learned really early on, that I had to present really well on the outside, regardless of what I was feeling on the inside. Like I remember when I was younger, like being told to smile, like just put a smile on your face. I even remember being told you're only pretty when you put a smile on your face. And so this was a message like I learned at a very, very young age to just, stuff my feelings. It didn't matter how Tammie was feeling, it didn't matter what was going on inside. I literally just had to present well, that everything was good. And, that was really hard because I think from a really early age, I started stuffing those feelings. And Doug, I believe you know this about me, but I also identify as a food addict because I can see the commonalities between the way I drank later on with the way that I ate very early on. So, I just remember when I would go babysitting, like hunting for snacks. And, when my parents were out, like I remember going in the baking drawer and like looking for something, and you don't even know what you're looking for. It's just you're looking for something to help with this feeling of like anxiety or, just this feeling, all I can do is call it stuffing. I'm just stuffing down how I'm feeling because there's no other outlet for that in my life. And so, that was definitely a theme growing up for me. As I moved along a little bit later, I was a competitive tennis player. So I had the opportunity to travel on my own from a very young age. And I was always too terrified to like do anything sort of wrong or out of character when I was home because I really did grow up with a very sort of big fear of consequences at home. Like I just knew that my mother would like be really upset if I did anything, to disgrace the family, sort of say. So when I had the opportunity to travel for tennis, I was around friends, other people who I thought were so cool and so that was like the opportunity I was given to, start drinking from a very young age. And I can see now, looking back on it, of course, you always have good hindsight, but like my relationship with alcohol was never normal. From the very first time I drank, and then in later years as well, through university, like I can tell from a very young age, I always wanted more. And I say that quite frequently that I have the disease of more because, I look back on it and I think I could never have one drink. Like never. It was always if I had one, I wanted more. If I had one cookie, I wanted more. So it was kind of like there was never such a thing as just moderation for me. And when I went to university, partied a little too hard, really was very shameful about all of that. Like, I did okay in university, could have done a lot better. And one of the pieces of my story that I've since healed from now, but one of the big things was that when I went to university, Doug, I never actually graduated. I finished 39 out of 40 courses in a science degree. And I always thought that, I wanted to be a doctor. And that's because I was told, oh, you'd make a great doctor. And so I was like, okay, I'll be a doctor. There's the chameleon thing again. And so I went through university doing okay, but also, partying lots, binge drinking like crazy. being in situations that, are really quite scary. I could have died from my drinking like several times. I know I could have, just from the binge, from the amount of alcohol that I would consume. So basically, that shame of not completing that degree was something that I carried with me literally for the next few decades. And it was really hard. Like, I always felt like such a failure. I sort of, I was always underemployed. I was always, looking to sort of mask that, I hate to say this, but like when I got married the first time round, and don't get me wrong, I love being a mother. It's like the number one, it's my favorite thing. But I also like, there's this part of me that realizes that because I hadn't graduated university and lived up to my career expectations, those of other people and of myself, I just threw myself into parenthood, just threw myself into it. And, one thing that I also, I guess, sort of skipped over when I was in my teenage years, like one of the things that I really got a lot of attention for was this idea that Tammie was a really independent person. Because, I would travel around for tennis from a very early age. And like everybody, like I got attention about that because people would say, oh, Tammie's so independent. She can do this and she can go these places. And I loved people talking about me like that. But, in later years, again, like through those university years, I actually could have used a lot of help. And had I practiced those muscles of asking for help, it just really makes me wonder, like, maybe I would have finished the university degree. Maybe I would have gone on to do, post-secondary education. But asking for help, Doug, was something that was just completely foreign to me. It was, again, that would have been a sign of failure if I had ever asked for help. So that idea of independence, again, all the way through my 30s when I was having my 5 beautiful children, like I was really just trying to be the very best parent I could be. And, in a lot of ways, I believe that I was a good parent. And, I don't say that today, to say anything about me. It just reflects like my wonderful children, they're incredible human beings. So I figure I must have done something right. So all through my 30s, I didn't drink. There were, a few times where I would drink and, there were a couple of binge episodes during that decade. But really it kind of became, more of a social thing for, moms to drink wine. Basically after when I finished having my kids, on Friday nights, I would have a friend over and we would share a bottle of wine kind of thing. Or, I'd have a few glasses of wine on a Friday or Saturday when I was cooking dinner kind of thing. And it was all very, very normal for what seemed like a long time. And then I decided that I needed to divorce my ex-husband. Things hadn't been right for a very long time. And, I look at it now and I think, I probably really shouldn't have married the person that I did because I think it was easier for me to look at his problems and make his problems the focus of my attention instead of looking at my own. So I take full ownership over that. Like, really, I had no business, trying to look after somebody else when I could barely look after myself. So, in any case, that's part of my story. And I adore my 5 children, so you can't have any regrets about that. And then, so when I was going through that divorce, though, I would say that that was the first time, other than obviously the binge drinking and whatnot, I would have to say that my drinking turned to like, it was like for another purpose then. I really felt like it became a tool for me to use to help me through anxiety because the divorce was not an easy divorce. It took me a long time to get through lots of things. I don't need to go into detail about that, but it was very, very stressful. And so it got to the point where, I was drinking during the day to help combat the anxiety of having to, just deal with paperwork and all of the things that would get me to the point of, being able to divorce him. The other piece to that was that I really loved his family. Like, it was really like I held on to that marriage for as long as I could because I loved them. And I was terrified of hurting people. So I guess that's sort of, I'll come back to that, but that's sort of the other part of that quote that I shared with you, which is something that I try to live by now. But in any case, so the drinking sort of, it escalated for sure. And it became a more frequent thing during the day. So that went on, like, basically throughout the years of my leading up to the divorce and through the divorce. And in the meantime, what's amazing is that I met this really amazing man when my husband and I were separated. And so the stuff, it kind of all overlaps. But by the time I was divorced from my first husband, my current husband, because I'm now remarried, things were coming along great with him. But at that point, like once we were all together and, I was through the divorce and everything, Doug, it got to the point I knew I had to stop drinking because I was really drinking a lot then. And at that point, I was drinking because I was happy. I was drinking to celebrate. And like, I thought my life was really great, or it should be at least, except I could not stop drinking. So, I guess to progress from there, I went into the hospital. I checked myself into the hospital, trying to get some help. And that was the beginning of, I would say, my attempt at recovery. So at this point, I actually still thought that all I needed to do was learn to drink like a regular person. So I laugh about that because, I know that now I'll never, ever be able to drink like a regular person. So I went through periods of, trying to be sober, but always still going back to the alcohol. And every time I would go back to it, Doug, it would just get worse. I was drinking, by the time I checked myself into the hospital, I was drinking about 3 bottles of wine a day. And after I had reached out for help, and started drinking again, of course, then I started trying to hide it from everybody. So I turned to vodka and, things just got worse from there, worse and worse. And throughout the beginning of the pandemic, I was also only working part-time. So it gave me more of an opportunity. Like I didn't have, I didn't feel like I had a purpose at this point. The other piece of my story is that my oldest daughter, she left home at one point, and that was really heartbreaking for me because as I shared with you, like I identified as like this person who I thought, I was a great mom. Like I lived for my kids and I lived for parenting. And that was just heartbreaking for me. Like I was really quite shattered by that. My drinking just got worse. I was completely depressed. And Doug, by the time it came to an end, I was basically suicidal. I didn't know how to live. I didn't want to die, but I also didn't know how to live my life. I thought I was a complete failure. And I just truly didn't know how I was going to go on. So, luckily, my new husband, I credit him truly with saving my life because he called the police and they hunted me down, and the rest is sort of history. But by the time that happened, I knew that I was done. I just didn't know how to live, with drinking anymore. And so therein, lies the beginning of the true recovery. I was already signed up to go to a treatment center in Toronto called Renaissance. And I went into their 28-day program, thankfully. And when I walked through those doors, Doug, oh my gosh, that was like my life changed on so many levels. First of all the counselors were in recovery themselves, and that was like life changing to me because I had dealt with like professionals through the hospital and whatnot, but like to look at these women and look at them and know that they were also like, I actually asked my admitting counselor, like, wait a second, you guys are in recovery too? Like, you're alcoholics and drug addicts? I like that was my mind was blown because I didn't think I had a life. I truly didn't think I had a life. I didn't think I had a purpose. I thought my life was over, you know. So that was amazing to me. So Doug, when I went there, I was so ready for treatment. I was like a sponge, like learning absolutely everything about addiction. That's where I put together the piece of, you know, my alcoholism was very similar to the way that I ate. And so I started understanding about food addiction as well. And so I was like, okay, well, if abstinence is the solution for alcoholism, maybe that's the same for, you know, how I eat. So, abstinence is a definitely a better way for me to approach certain types of foods as well. So that's all like, it was just an experience that I'll never forget. And again, it was life changing. So much so that when I graduated from Renascent, I actually signed up to go back to school because I knew that there were a lot of things in my life that needed to change. And I knew I needed to change that narrative that I had told myself for all those decades, like that, you know, I didn't graduate from university, and I was tired of feeling sorry for myself. So I went back to school. I asked a lot of questions, like how do you become an addictions counselor? And I have so many mentors who were counselors at the time, and they helped me pick the perfect program. And so I went back to school, and Doug, I actually did walk across the stage this past this past June. Yes, I graduated
Yay.
as a thank you. Yeah, it was like that was a true, like beautiful, like it was just so meaningful to have graduated this time round, right?
Mhm.
And so I don't carry that shame of not graduating anymore because, you know, I have sort of redefined my life in that way, and I'm very proud of that. And my husband and all the children were there, to help celebrate that, which was really, really special. And then the next piece, Doug, like I actually got hired by the very treatment center that I went to. So I work as an addictions counselor now in Toronto at Renascent. And
Nice.
I'm so proud that, I'm able to work and help other people.
Absolutely. We don't have much time left because I want to touch on something really quick.
Of course.
Being a counselor today, do you see yourself walking through the door a lot in other people?
Oh gosh, yes.
Yeah. So like that really helps, like you being a recovering addict really helps you identify with other people and maybe help treat them a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. That
yeah,
lived experience is really, I think, a key to how successful we can be.
awesome. Um, you have such an amazing story. I have one more question to ask you quickly. I know you have an amazing husband, Kevin. He's been like a blessing in your life. You know, my wife doesn't, and I don't know about this about you. I don't think I've ever asked you this, but my wife doesn't drink. She actually quit drinking 2 years before I, quit drinking because she was like, I can't put up with him. I'm not going to add fuel to the fire. Does Kevin drink today?
Okay, so this is actually one of the things that I heard you share in a meeting one time, because this is something you and I have in common, or rather, like our spouses have in common. Because my incredible husband, he actually, when I shared with you how I went into the hospital, which was almost 2 years before I walked through the doors of my treatment center. He said at that time well, I don't have to drink, and he drank along with me for all of those years, like that we were, that we met and all of that. He's not an alcoholic, because he could just stop.
Nice.
And so, yeah, he actually said, well, I don't have to drink. So he actually has more sobriety than me, which is hilarious because he's not even an
So does my
alcoholic.
life. Yeah.
I know. But
That's
the other thing that's just so remarkable about Kevin, Doug, is how, how recovery can transform not just us, but like it can transform people who aren't in recovery or who don't even need recovery.
Oh, yeah.
Because he used to be one of these people, I was just sharing this at work today. He was one of these people who was just like, Tammie, just stop. Like, just stop. What's wrong? Like, our lives are great. Why don't, we have everything.
Mm.
And, so that was the lens through which he, saw my problem. But having gone through the family program at our treatment center, and just obviously loving me and supporting me and listening to me, like he actually is like the biggest supporter of people in recovery now. So much so that he's actually spoken at events for Renison.
Oh, wow.
From the family perspective, and he speaks about it from the lens of like, we are a typical Canadian family.
Okay.
We've got two cars in the driveway. We own our home. We have friends, like we have children, and he jokes that, okay, maybe we have more children than, a lot of people, but like, it's a regular family. And he just goes on to explain how this disease does not discriminate.
Yeah.
And I love his message. I think it's such an important one. And coming from somebody who just didn't understand it at all, and like who just was like, he just, Tammie, stop drinking, you know? And if love could have got me sober, it would have got me sober a long time ago,
Yeah,
the fact is
absolutely.
that we need help.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I could sit here and talk to you all night. I think you're an amazing person. You're doing amazing things in life. Keep shining, because we need people like you in recovery to spread the message and spread hope to those people out there. So, keep being that shining star that you are, keep spreading the message. And thank you so much for being on Canadian Sober A today. And I'm sure you're going to help a lot of people with your message today.
Thank you, Doug. I'm so honored to be a part of this journey and to help you spread the message. So thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
This is awesome. Okay, thanks everybody for tuning in to Canadian Sober A. I love you all. We'll be back again next week with another amazing guest on Canadian Sober A. So peace and love, Ontario. We'll see you next time.